In our plenary session, Corporate Governance, Talking the Walk, we feature a conversation between Mr. Harsh Mariwala. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together to welcome him. And Mr. M. Damodaran. I'd like to request Mr. Damodaran to please welcome Mr. Mariwala with flowers. A warm welcome, sir, to you. Mr. Mariwala is the founder and chairman of Marico. He has been widely credited for introducing and practicing very high standards of corporate governance in his company. He transformed a traditional commodity-driven business into a leading consumer products company. Passionate about innovation, he established the Marico Innovation Foundation in 2003. In 2012, he launched the Ascent Foundation, a peer-learning entrepreneurial platform, and he's the founder of Kaya Limited, which runs a chain of skincare clinics in India and in the Middle East. He has also set up the Mariwala Health Initiative, which supports mental health causes. Mr. Damodaran really doesn't need an introduction. He's our host, and their conversation today will focus on Mr. Mariwala's learning experiences and more. So it's over to you, Mr. Damodaran.
Thank you, Rini. Delighted to have you with us today and to talk about your journey. But before that, I'm not a television anchor, never been one, don't aspire to be one. But let me do an audience poll. How many of you have read Mr. Mariwala's book? Unlikely that you'll sell more copies. They've all
potential is more.
Right. I should have asked another question. How many of you have read it carefully? Okay. No, I won't wait for an answer. Because I'll start with the book. You might have noticed one thing about the book, and that is that the cover of the book is transparent. You don't find a book where the cover is transparent, where you look through the first layer and see what is below that. In some sense, that gives the game away about what kind of author has written that book, how transparent he has been. But my first question to you on the book itself, is it harsh realities or harsh realities?
It's a pun on my name. It's harsh realities, but it's a pun on my name.
Harsh realities.
But just to add a little bit about the cover, normally, this is my first book, and I think it's the last book. I think individuals like Walter and others have written many, many books here. But normally you go to the publisher. In my case, it was Penguin Random House, and they have a design department. They come up with some alternate designs. Normally, it's your photo is there or some other design is there. And of course, they did that. I was not at all happy with that. So I said, I have to do something different. And I went to a lady who only specialized in designing book covers.
Okay.
Her only job is book covers. She was earlier in advertising, but now she only does book covers. So at that time, Anil Dharkar suggested. Anil Dharkar unfortunately passed away. So she read the book, and then she came with some 2-3 options. So it's actually, the cover signifies what is written in the book in terms of transparency, innovation, and I think I was very happy with what she did.
And that's true.
So all I can say is a lot of thought went into the name of the book and also the cover, apart from the contents of the book.
No, great credit to her that she saw the essence of the book, which is transparency.
Yeah.
Now, you were born in a traditional business family, and then you had your travails, if I may call it that. Out of that, you carved out a very modern, forward-looking kind of a company, premised on values, good governance.
Yeah.
Yesterday, we had a session on whether ethics and economics can coexist. And in your case, clearly it seems to have coexisted wonderfully, almost as if they were made for each other. We don't see that happening in too many other places. But tell me, how was that transition from being a part of the family business to striking out on your own?
So it happened in 2 stages. Initially, when I started working, I was working in a traditionally family managed company. My father, 3 of my uncles, managing a business out of a very crowded locality in Masjid Bandar, where it was impossible to get into the office itself. And everything was done by the family. And I was the first person from the next generation to enter the business. So I had just finished my graduation. I'm just a commerce graduate, unlike most of you, maybe postgraduates. But my father said, okay, we join the business.
The 2 of us here were only graduates. Yeah.
Okay. So I joined the business without any guidance, I didn't have anything in my mind. I knew one thing, that I was going to run my own business and I was not going to work for anybody. That one thing I was very clear, but I didn't have any clue what I would do. So in that exploration, I identified consumer products and converted the edible oil business from unbranded to branded. Now, by then, 3, 4 of my cousins had joined business. So it was like 7 or 8 family members in one company. And that would just scare away talent. And to me, in an FMCG business, talent is the most important thing. I would say any business, forget about FMCG. And we would want to recruit talent from companies like Levers and other leading FMCG companies. And just the 7, 8 family members itself would prevent good talent to come in. On top of that, Masjid Bandar, then again allocation of resources between different profit centers. So I was able to convince the family, and it took almost 2 years for me to convince the family to take this business, which at that time was the largest business in Bombay Oil and the most profitable business, into a different company, Marico. And that's how Marico was formed in the year 1990. But it was not, and many people think that you build the business, and I had built this business from 0 base to 80 crores at that time. People think that in a family, because you build the business, you should get a higher stake. I think it's very, very difficult to convince others that because you built it, you should get a higher stake. So I didn't even ask for it. So Marico formed, the stake was 25% each, like my father and 3 of his brothers, and that continued. I was okay with that. I just wanted freedom in terms of doing things on my own and attract good talent, move the office from Masjid Bandar to, then we moved to Bandra, and just wanted to be accountable. And I said that I will be the only family member in Marico who will manage. I didn't want anybody else from the family. It took a long, long time, but I think looking back, those 2, 3 years spent in convincing family, building consensus with my cousins then, to me, that was the most important decision in my life. If I had not done that properly, I would have been struggling managing family dynamics. And one has seen it in many businesses. Families start fighting and the business suffers tremendously. So those 2, 3 years of consensus building was well spent. And I think that gave me a great opportunity to start Marico. So that's how the first leg. And the second leg, there was some difference of opinion. I bought out shares of 2 of my uncles. Yes. That forced me to go public in the year 1996. So it's done in 2 phases, the shift from family to so-called professional.
You mentioned that sometimes there is an expectation that you ought to get the larger stake in the family because you are in the business, because you're from the family. Now,
or because you built that business, not because you have built that business.
You built it, yes. Now, there is an expectation among some members and families, in business families, that if you're born into that family, you have a right to be in business.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's almost as if you're saying, I am born into business. No, you can't be born into business. What do you do with that kind of people?
It's a real situation, what you're saying. It is real. I have faced it myself. People said, I'm born into the family. I'm entitled to play a role. I mean, your responsibility goes hand in hand with your accountability, And many a times in a family managed organization, there are multiple family members. It's so diffuse because you don't have a clear role. So you can't be held accountable because you don't have a clear role. So individuals are entitled to play a certain role. They are not accountable. They want to share the wealth in terms of, in those days, I'm talking of early 90s, most companies were debiting most of their family expenses to the company, whether it's car or travel or whatever else. So they would want all that, but you don't want to be held accountable. That's very sad, actually.
That's the best way to kill the business, I think.
Yeah, and the family has to play a very important role. The family has to have a right charter. And the head of the family should start playing that role that, how do individual family members get responsibility? Are they accountable? How do they get remunerated? I think these are real issues in a family managed companies. And if the management of family in a family, especially large families, can be very, very complex. You actually, because you play multiple roles, and we are all staying in the same building, so you are related to each other. Those days we had joint families, so you have meals together, then in business also you're together, your uncle, so multiple roles. And it's very difficult those days, I'm saying, to talk openly and give feedback to elders, because it would not get accepted. Yeah. So it would lead to a lot of frustration, but things have changed now. But all I want to say is family management is very, very crucial in family managed companies. And if it is not handled well, it can put you back.
One of the things that most people know you for and respect you for is the fact that you moved back from executive responsibilities, brought in professionals.
Yeah.
There have been very few companies, if memory serves me right. Aisher, in the good old days, Mr. Sandilya is here with us, there you are. The Murugappa group, and then of course there was a lot of back and forth.
Yeah.
But I think you have, if I may say so, reduced it to a fine art of how can you step back and yet be part of that larger picture that drives the business without being, without stepping on the toes of, let's say, your chief executives or whoever. Has that been an easy decision?
So let me describe a little bit, go a little bit in detail. I think what you mentioned, iShare, some other companies, Dabur also, many companies, because multiple family members were involved, including Pidilite.
Yes.
They thought that the best option for them is to get an outsider, which was a good decision from there. I think Dabur has done well. Pidilite, I know Bharat, I just met her. They seem to be doing well under a professionally managed company. My case was a little different. I was the only person in the family managing the business. So there was no other family members in Marico from the time we started in 1990 onwards. So normally in the Indian society, as you rightly put it, it's a very hierarchical society. I mean, it's expected that your son will follow you. Yes. So when I decided to step down, the current MD came to me, and he was with me for almost 10 years or so, and had multiple roles. He did extremely well, from marketing sales, India business head. And at some stage he said that he just had a frank conversation. We are a very open organization. Whatever everybody feels, you can talk openly. It's like, do I have any chance in this, or are you getting driven by your hierarchical mindset that your son has to inherit you or follow you? And at that time I had not even thought of stepping down. I had kept 3 or 5 years later, so I had not even thought about all that. My son was young at that time, and I went to the board. And one thing I've always strongly believed in the area of governance is that the organization's interests should come first. There are always conflicts between the organization's interest and any stakeholder interest. May it be promoter, may it be a certain manager who has done exceedingly well but started losing relevance because the business has changed. That thumb rule I always, the organization's interest comes first. So what are the choices available to me? One is to say that I'll continue and I will, he would have left. He said to me clearly, if you are not giving me a path to this role within a short period of time, I will leave. So I would have lost him. I could have done for some more years, waited for my son to get ready. But I discussed that with board in detail. And the board felt that I had managed this business for almost from 1990 to 2014, almost 25 years. And prior to that in the Bombay also I had built it. It needed a fresh blood, and this guy had done well, and we can't afford to lose him. So I said, okay, if it is in the organizational interest, I will step down. It was a difficult decision, especially at my family end, because, I mean, what do you tell in the society? It's expected. Why are you not promoting your son? So it was a difficult thing to sell it within the family, to my wife, to my children. But I think they understood, and looking back, I think they have also accepted that I did the right thing. Because post that, my son is a director now in Marico, but he has started his own business, which is doing flourishing. So in a way, he has found his own path to create his own future. Going back to Marico, I think one other thing which is very relevant for organizations which are passing the baton from a founder, promoter, family managed promoter to a professional is to identify what will be the role. So the board asked me to write down what will I do, what I won't do, and what he will do. So that is there captured in the book also. Yes, but yes, very clearly, I will not participate in investor meetings unless, because of a certain relationship I've had with some investor, I would meet. But by and large, I will not participate in investor conference. If I talk to media, I will only talk about the macro issues and not Marico issues. To that extent, I will have a monthly review meeting with him and his team every month. I will do skip level meetings. I will interview people beyond a certain level when they are coming in, and things like that. So that clarity was very important, because I've seen that the tendency is that, okay, because you build the business, you are in love with the business, though on paper you have appointed somebody else, but you go on interfering. And I didn't want that to happen. So I have my say, but I take it up in the monthly review meeting when I have with them, that these are my thoughts, and we arrive at a consensus. But it has worked out wonderfully well. That thought, that clarity at the beginning, before he stepped into the role, played a very, very important role in him settling down. And I think I've also enjoyed that journey post that, because I've been able to do many other things which I would never have been able to do.
That is right. Yeah. Tell me, you've taken a number of tough decisions. One of the interesting decisions was, of course, setting up a factory in my home district in Palakkad, right? When the whole world and its uncle told you this is not the place to do business in, the labor is very difficult to deal with, and then you went and set it up and you ran it very well. How did you win the trust of the labor? Because I come from that state, I know it's not the easiest thing to do. Yeah.
So I'll go a little bit in detail to explain the situation, but this was our first greenfield factory. I had inherited factories which were based in Bombay, very old factories, and we wanted to have a proper factory which was good for packaging and oil crushing. So we did, as usually, did some study in terms of which is the best location for us to locate the factory from a financial angle. So where the taxes would be lowest, where the freight cost would be lowest, our cost of production would be the lowest, and clearly the best state came out was Kerala, because most of coconuts are grown in Kerala. Now that is actually, Tamil Nadu has overtaken Kerala in the last maybe 10-15 years, but at that time, I'm talking of 94, 95, I think. So we already had a factory in Kerala in Bombay Oil Industries. And all my uncles, and it was going through a little bit of a rough patch. Everybody, my uncle, my father, all my friends saying, don't go by these kind of theoretical studies. On paper, it's showing that you will save money, but actually in reality, you will face a lot of industrial relations problem. Half the time your factory would be closed down. So I didn't accept that. My team at that time, and I have to give credit to the team, they said that no, we are taking this up as a challenge. And we will prove it to you and others that we will manage it in such a way that you don't face any IR issues. So I said, okay, I want to know a little bit more about what will you do. It's just not, I can't put a blind faith in you in our first greenfield factory. So I just want to understand from you what you will do differently compared to what other industries are doing. And they came back with a very deep insight, saying that all these problems in Kerala, and one of our head of HR was from Kerala, so he knew that state very well. So he said that actually Kerala is very intelligent. You are one big example.
That's a conversation for another day.
And they are qualified, they are highly educated. But the big problem in Kerala is that after office work, there is very little for these workmen to do. And our location of the factory at that time emerged around Palakkad, in a small village outside Palakkad, Kanjikode. And they said that if we can actually engage them post-work, if we keep them busy, they will not have free time. Because they have free time and then all the unions go to them, so that time gets channelized into unproductive activities like union. But if we keep them busy and we select the right people from the right families, we will not have this. So from my head of HR, and they went to each and every family before and talked to the parents and talked about our philosophy in terms of recruitment. And then from day one, we divided that, not a very large factory, about 100, 150 people, divided the factory into 4 different houses, like in schools. And in those 4 houses, they had multiple things to do. Art, culture, dancing, music, games, sports, and whatever they want to do, it was, and then we would have this competition like in school. So, and then we also had from day one job rotation, because fatigue comes in if you do the same job day in and day out. So every 3 months a person would get rotated into a new job, unless you are in a specialized job like boiler operator or something like that. So I think these 2 insights in terms of job rotation, selecting the right people, occupying them post-office hours or post-working hours, and treating them well, I think, and not exploiting them. That played a very, very important role. For the first 5-6 years, we didn't even have a union. After that, there was some union. But we didn't have any stoppage. And they say role of HR is, to me, HR can play a very, very important role in business. And we must have saved hundreds of crores of rupees in that 10-15 years. In just terms of our lower taxes as well as freight costs. Because of that decision, of course, I backed the team, but it worked out wonderfully well.
So empowerment has been key to this.
Empowerment combined with good talent. Empowerment by itself doesn't work. I strongly believe that talent has to be a very good quality. And combine that with a very flat organization structure, because you can't empower people if you have a bureaucratic structure with multiple layers. So in a flat structure, if you have good talent, then automatically the leaders will be forced to delegate, because the talent reporting to them is so good, and good talent actually empowers themselves. I've seen it.
That is true.
Yeah.
Sometimes, though, the leaders feel insecure if the talent is...
Yeah, but if the leaders also are good quality, then that insecurity will not come in, They will always take something if they're reporting something from me and things like that. So it's a continuous process of learning, empowering yourself, and then, to some extent, I think that plays a very, very important role, yeah.
Shifting to an entirely different area, do you think the regulatory regime is over-prescriptive in India? Every morning, get up, write a new regulation, somebody violates a law, write another one.
I don't read too much of it. I personally think that I have to do things in the right way. If I do things in the right way, why should I get worried? Of course, you have to follow the rate.
No, the load of work. Yeah.
Load, actually, I get, whenever there is some changes done by SEBI or anything else, I mean, we get an update. Once in a while, we may have to tweak our board constitution in terms of diversity, or if a board member is there for more than a certain number of years. But by and large, we have not been so, shall I say, hampered by too much of regulations. I think you have to combine regulations with advisories. Sometimes advisories go a little overboard, I find. They have to look at the overall, how the company is managed, rather than pointing some silly issues which advisories, it is their role to point it out. I'm not saying no. And many times good investors, they don't even get bothered about some of the advices if there is something negative in terms of not voting and things like that. But yeah, I think you can't tackle everything through compliance and regulation. That's one thing. I think market forces have to put that pressure on you. Yeah. And in this case, the investors, the board, even your employees, if you go to a good management school today, the employees want to know what is the governance within the organization. So if multiple market, whoever are connected with you, including consumers, if you are, I think they play a very important role. And there is nothing like that compared to some regulator telling
you what to do on a continuing basis. Yeah. You are fairly active in the innovation space, promoting innovation. How did this idea occur to you?
So, in my formative years, I think innovation played a very important role. we launched Parachute brand name, and initially we got some market share of about 15% in the category. It's a very large category. I mean, just to give an idea for others who may not be knowing, we sell something like 6 to 7 crore bottles every month. So we were stagnating. That time it was lesser, then the market has expanded over a period of time because of conversion from loose to packed. So the whole market was in tins. And tins is more expensive than plastics. It's inconvenient to use because you have to pour out it, and you have to just dip your fingers. It's not as attractive as plastic. So we said that can we convert the market from tin to plastics? At one level, very simple. The consumer loved the idea, but the trade was opposing it like anything. And unless the trade stocked the product, it will not reach the consumer. So apparently 10 years prior to that, somebody else had launched coconut oil in plastics. Disaster because it was a square-shaped bottle, a lot of oil on the outer surface. The retailer would close the shop. Next day, all the stock would get bitten by rats. Not only the product gets spoiled, the shop also would get. So retailers were, but you don't give up. One thing, if you have a good idea, no entrepreneur will give up that idea. You have to go on trying. So we went back to the packaging vendor, said that, can you design a bottle where the rats will find it difficult to get a grip? So round bottle. Can you pack it in such a way that not a single drop of oil is on the outer surface of the bottle? We did that, kept in a rat cage for 1 or 2 days. Everything worked out well. And with that result, we went very aggressive in terms of assuring trade that this is working. And that at one level, very simple innovation, but relatively difficult to implement. It took 5 years for us to convert the whole market from tin to plastics. And our market share jumped up from 15% to 50%. Now the same thing, after a few years, we identified Bangladesh as a market. And the whole market was dominated in tins by local players. So we said, wow, this is something we did it in India. We did multiple innovations in packaging. I just talked about one tin to plastic, but plastic, wide mouth plastics, then pilfer-proof caps and things like that. Can we roll out all the innovations, which we did over a period of 5 to 7 years in India, straight away in Bangladesh? Within 3 years, we got 80% market share. We are the largest Indian company, I think, in Bangladesh. We're the only listed company. And I think that insight, innovation, we rolled it out well in Bangladesh. So again, going back, why innovation? I think I'm just giving one example. There are multiple examples in my initial journey where we did some innovation which has succeeded and which has had discontinuous impact on our growth journey. And there are multiple examples of innovation which have failed also.
Yes.
Yes. So it's not just that everything, because that fear of failure should not haunt you. If you have that fear of failure within the organization, people stop taking risks. You have to take risks, you have to experiment, everything will not succeed. There is always some learning from some failures, and that's how.
They say failure is the best teacher.
True.
Success
I can give you multiple examples where a failure which has led to a huge success later on, in foods. Yeah.
Yesterday we had a session on risk management, and this thought came up very strongly that you have to take decisions, you have to take risks. To avoid risks and not to take decisions is not going to get you anywhere.
Absolutely. And people are, especially the management role in this is very, very important. You want to create a culture of innovation where you want the brand manager or sales or anybody else to think innovation, and they innovate, they take a certain risk. There are limitations to market research. There is no shortcut to actually prototyping that product with the consumers. And sometimes it doesn't work. Now, if I as management punish that person in terms of not giving the right increment or not giving the right promotion, in spite of that person being worthy of promotion, I'm sending a wrong signal that I'm punishing failures. And if I do that, people within the organization will stop taking risks. So you have to support intelligent failures.
That's true. Yeah. In fact, they say this country does not celebrate success, it doesn't celebrate failure also. True. And both need to be celebrated if the country is to make progress. So the Innovation Foundation Must have thrown up a large number
Yes.
of bright young people with great ideas, fire in their bellies.
So we started Innovation Foundation in the year 2003, and we have done multiple things. But the key things today we are doing, we have Innovation Awards, and this happens once in 2 years. This time we didn't do it through COVID, so this time we are doing it on the 1st of March. And do it very, very differently. We have a knowledge partner, and on average we get about 700 to 800 entries, both in social and business. The objective of our Marico Innovation Foundation is to fuel innovation. And then we have a jury which is very different than the normal jury. We have two-stage jury where the knowledge partner brings a short list of organization, the jury goes into detail, and then the knowledge partner again goes back and verifies those details with the shortlisted numbers, and comes back to the same jury, meets again second time and decides the winners. And the award function also is very, very different. It's no thanking anybody. It's just go like a TED talk. All the award winners are trained by a TED trainer and talk about what is the innovation. It's a very crisp 1.5 hours function. So earlier Dr. Mashilkar was heading it. Now, after many years, Ms. Chandra has taken over from Dr. Mashilkar. So, but for those who want to attend, most welcome. It's going to be held at the Geo Center here. On an average, about 1,000 people come. So, anyone of you wants to just send him the details or send me a mail at hcm@marico.com and you'll get an invitation.
Tell us about...
And we also do a lot of other things. I'll just since you a lot of questions raised to me at that time. Plastics was not so negative in terms of environmental impact as it is today. So it's our responsibility to handle this issue. So what we have done over a period of time is that 95% of our plastics we use are recyclable or reusable. And that will be 100% in the next 2 years. Separately, as a part of our Marico Innovation Foundation study, we have taken the usage of plastics and we have done a study with Indian Institute of Science and Praxis Consulting in terms of how do you reduce the incidence by reusing, replacing and recycling plastics. And this was a global study and the results will get unveiled on the, I think, 10th or 11th of January, and I think that will have some impact on the environment. So I think we as a responsible corporate citizen also have to ensure that we do something on our own plus influence others in this journey.
What is your take on ESG? Everybody is talking about it. Not too many people understand what it means. I was reminded of a conversation that I had with Mr. Venkaiah Naidu when he was a minister in charge of smart cities. And I asked him, I said, sir, what does smart city mean? He said, what answer do you want? I can give you 100 answers because 100 people think it means different things. And I'm still to find out. He's a minister. He said, I'm still figuring out what is a smart city because different people tell me different things. Of course, predictably, it's not gone anywhere. ESG is traveling down that path.
So, I don't agree with you. I think it's going. It's especially after the COVID, this whole ESG globally, not only in India, has got a lot of traction. And it's become, I'm on 5-6 companies on boards, and it's discussed at board level. Many companies have a separate ESG committee or a part of a CSR committee or a NRC committee. So ESG is getting a lot of traction, and ultimately it is getting converted into goals in terms of what we should be doing, more so in sustainability and environment. We just had in our last board meeting, which was held about a month back, a presentation to the board. So I think board is tracking it. It's very, very crucial that every company invest in ESG, again demanded by all the stakeholders, which is very good, whether it is investors or your employees or potential employees. And I think many times there is no cost to it. Actually, this leads to cost saving. So I think it's very positive. I personally think that all organizations should pursue a very aggressive ESG journey. It will take 3 to 5 years to achieve all the goals, whether it's relating to water or environment or plastics or whatever. But I think each and every organization has to have a roadmap over the next 3 years with accountability within the organization, some individual responsible for that. And I think it will move forward. I am very confident. I personally think that just now you are getting a certain premium in the capital markets for ESG. Once everybody catches up, it will become a hygiene factor. If you don't do it, you will get penalized. If you do it, you will not get rewarded over a period of next 3-5 years. If it is continuing.
Over 5 to 10 years, you expect it to be a hygiene factor?
I think so, because then, everybody, at least I know of each and every company I am on board of is pursuing an ESG strategy.
I think investors ask the first question about ESG before they ask about financials these days.
Yeah.
What about the journey into health? Is this a relatively new area of interest, healthcare, or has it been with you in your mind for many years?
No, I didn't understand your question. So
no, your interventions in healthcare.
Mental health you're talking about. Okay. So I for one believe in, this is my passion, to identify something which has not been done by others. Can I be a pioneer? Can I be a thought leader in whatever I do? So that is the starting point. If I have to choose areas where I have to give something back to the society, I don't want to invest in hardware. I don't want to invest in hospitals or schools or college. That's not me. I have to invest in a cause where I can be a thought leader. So again, I have done mainly in the area of entrepreneurship and mental health.
Mental health, yes.
And health, I'm very passionate about health, physical, whatever, exercising. So I realized that mental health was neglected, and this journey started about 8 or 10 years back. And my daughter is very passionate about that. So with her, I discussed with many mental health professionals about what's happening and realized that there was a big gap. The impact in terms of loss of productivity goes into billions of dollars, and the government is also not taking it as seriously. And any of us can get impacted by that. I think 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 4 individuals at some stage in their lives have some mental health issues. It may not be serious, it could be anxiety impacting productivity. It could be a very serious issue also, but it has to be proactively dealt with. And at a low level, you may just talk to people and alleviate the stress part of it, but just talking to others will itself, it's a big relief. Of course, depending on the kind of issues, you have to find how do you deal with stress, anxiety, and every person goes through anxiety. There's not a single person in the world who doesn't have anxiety or stress at some stage in their lives. So with her, we started this, and it's grown. We started first association was with TIS in Bombay. They are on 12 or 14 hours helpline, and which is free. So we are funding it for last 8-10 years. It's called iCall. So anybody can phone up the numbers and talk to the counselors and get advice, and it's completely confidential. Nobody would know. I also don't know who they talk to. I get a report number of whatever. And then it's just grown. I think today we are supporting about 30 organizations. It'll grow to 50 organizations. We are a grant-making body, and I think our focus has shifted more towards marginalized communities. In small towns and rural areas, because in big cities there are multiple options available. There are mental health problems, but small towns, there are many organizations which are doing work, and I think our job is to support them financially and also in terms of helping them grow. So that's how, and I think we are today, if you ask me, my daughter is active in this. She is on board of Lancet on the mental health, and she speaks a lot on that. But I think we have been able to achieve that level of.
I think one person who brought it back into mainstream conversation without intending to do so was Kapil Dev.
Okay.
And in a recent interview, he said, "What is pressure?
Yes.
We should convert pressure into pleasure."
Correct, yes.
So is that in some sense indicative that we as a society have been living in denial about mental health problems? At one level, fear of ostracism, so you don't seek treatment.
You are absolutely
Whereas
right.
in the US, people, even the president goes to a shrink.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yes. It's okay if you're facing an issue. It's like if you have a flu, you go to a doctor. If you have issue mentally, then you go to whoever, expert, But you're absolutely right. It's a taboo, and I think to some extent, the actress Deepika Padukone, she went public, and it's okay to talk to others. Yeah.
That was big.
And she also is running some mental health outfit. But I think glad that with her kind of personality, definitely has more impact than me talking about it.
No, I think doing the work quietly at the end of the day is more productive. There are lots of people here who want to set up their own companies, I imagine. Not that they've told me, but I imagine they've. What are the 4 or 5 things you want to tell them? About how do you set up your own business? How do you conquer the fear of failure? Because many don't get started because they're worried about failing. How do you conquer that as you set up?
So I don't see any youngsters here, but some of them may be here. But nonetheless, I speak on this subject. How do you create a right to win? So I think today's environment is throwing a lot of new opportunities because you see a lot of discontinuity disruptions. COVID was a disruption, it's just thrown a lot of new opportunities. Even the war is a big disruption, again a lot of new opportunities. Combine that with so many new technologies coming in, our life is getting disrupted on a perpetual basis at a much faster rate. Any disruption, you have 2 lenses. One is threat perception, another is opportunity.
Yes.
So can you look at any disruption from an opportunistic angle? That's the first. Number 2, it's easier said than done. You need to see what is the unique thing you are bringing in your business. Highly competitive business environment, a me-too product will not succeed. You have to offer something which is unique. You may have an idea. The key thing is many times you don't have a full-fledged idea which you can launch. I am a strong believer in idea, dialogue with some individuals who are aware of that, develop it further, discuss it with potential customer, again fine-tune it, prototype it, fine-tune it, experiment, and then move it forward. But I think the starting point is not a me-too product, something innovative, something pioneering, and depending on the kind of business you want to be in, it could be some technology, it could be a patent. If you're in the service industry, some different way of service innovation. But I think the key thing is to develop a certain hypothesis on what you want to do, dialogue it, build it, and then scale it up. And then the second stage is have the right talent, because you can't do everything on your own. As the business grows, you need to have very good talent. So talent, culture building plays an important role. And lastly, as I'm saying that irrespective of the size of the organization, governance has to start from day one. Even for the smallest organization, if they start taking shortcuts, then you are sowing seeds of taking shortcuts from a long-term point of view. And that's very difficult to change when you grow them.
So that has to, from day one, get into the DNA of the organization.
Absolutely.
That is what you're saying. Good. Which is, I think, a right stage to throw it open to the audience. You won't get too many opportunities to ask him the questions that you might have in your minds, and they need to be asked. Identify yourself by name, and then make it a question, not a comment, not a discourse, not an alternative theory, right? Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Suri.
Good morning, everybody. Mariwala sir, one very basic question. Promoter has got a certain kind of passion, in a very successful organization.
Yeah.
A professional manager, looks at it in a different way. Generally, look up to your retirement or something like that.
Yeah.
So, how did you pass on your passion to a professional manager?
Yeah. So I think a very good question. It's a very good question. I think that's a big challenge if you want to convert a company from a family managed company to a professionally managed company. I think the biggest challenge is how do you instill an ownership mindset within the organization? I think that's a very big challenge, and I think the key thing is to instill an ownership mindset. For example, can you make them, basically we want to make each and every individual working within the organization, irrespective, even if I'm involved, I would want everybody else down the line to behave like an owner. So what does an owner do? Pursues opportunities, looks at costs, and if there are some wastages, of course, looks at that. Looks at positive from always, not by and large from a positive angle. I've heard, I've never worked anywhere else in
in my experience. So I hear a lot that this company is, a lot of bitching is going on, a lot of gossiping, a lot of backbiting. You don't want that to happen. You want individuals to behave like owners and, tackle the business issues rather than doing all these things. But that's a very big challenge if you create the right degree of trust, I would say. I think, and authenticity. Then you can, to some extent, do that. You have to create the right rewards. You have to, you may say that wealth is not important, but these days, individuals saying if owners can make so much wealth, why can't I make that much wealth? So you need to have rewards which should not turn to a greed, but if somebody does extremely well, then that person should get rewarded. So you need to create reward mechanisms. You have to empower that person. You have to treat that person with a lot of respect, and the whole organization culture also would play a very important role in driving that ownership mindset down the line. But it is easier said than done.
Someone at the back there, yes. Please identify yourself, stand up, and then ask the question so that you're captured on camera. Ownership of the question is important. Yeah, Jamie, go ahead.
I think your mic is not working. Or you can talk a little loudly.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Mr. Mariwala, you were talking about your cousins, all who were in business.
Yeah.
Now, each one of them has his own ambitions, has his own aspirations.
Yes.
How were you able to convince them to move out of this? Because this is some issue which we face all the time.
You're right, absolutely
Very
right.
interesting to hear from you.
Yeah.
How were you able to?
So I will see. In the family at that time, my father being the eldest, and 3 of his brothers, and then me being the eldest from the cousin. Then there was a big gap between me and my cousin next to me, about 8 years gap, and then 3 of them within 1 or 2 years gap. So at a time there were 5 cousins and 4 elders in the company, and I got what we call green balls, that is people to agree to my way of thinking. We formed 5 of us cousins. We discussed, debated for almost 1.5 years what should we be doing. If you're all together, what is the future of the group? How would we like to operate? And we said that we came with a proposal saying that each cousin will be managing 1 profit center. So that time Bombay Oil Industries got demerged into 4 different companies. And each cousin, we said that we will be the CEO of that company. So though I got Marico because I built it to the largest, all other cousins got the same amount of money to start that business. And we said that we will be together financially and our interests in each business will be similar. Only thing we want management freedom to manage our business, and then if there is freedom is there, then we'll hold you accountable also. So the process was actually each cousin managing a company or a business, and then a larger challenge was to how do you convince the elders, because they were in management and we were almost telling them now you should play a supervisory role, not get involved in day-to-day management. So that's why it took a little longer time, but luckily it went through. No, it was different businesses, completely different. I had built a consumer product business, another was a chemicals business, third was a spice extracts business, so a completely different business.
Yes, please. You're coming back up.
Yeah, Mr. Mariwala, my name is Deepak Sethi.
Yeah.
As always, very enriching to hear your views. My question is that Mr. Damodaran here is the unofficial brand ambassador of corporate governance. Mm-hmm. His opening statement yesterday was very striking. He said that those who need to be here are not here, and those who are here are already converted. Though I must say that you've not, so you're preaching to the converted, but you've not preached, you've shared, which is brilliant. My question is, what can be done to get the people who are not here to be here? Question one. A related question. For all the people who are here, how do we build the spine not to succumb under pressure? Because it's not that people don't know what is to be done. I mean, say there's a lot of learning here. But in crunch time, people don't speak up. So your comments on that?
You're absolutely right. I think I always say that, I know many founders, promoters. I think the problem starts with their mindset, because they have founded a business. Maybe at that time it was a private company. At some stage, it's become public company. But the mindset that it is my company. So starting point is it is my company, but it is not your company. If you are a publicly limited company, it is not your company. It is, you are one of the founders, you may be the majority shareholder, but it is not your company. I think that is the starting point in terms of, and many founders, it's going to be a very slow process. It will happen, but the biggest impact will be driven by the stakeholders, whether it is the board of directors or whether it is investors or consumers, and the process will be slow because, it's many of their mindset is still not there, and with the next generation coming in, it will happen. It's not going to happen overnight, and no amount of forcing individuals to such, it will, some amount, if they read and all that, it will get impacted. But it's a long drawn kind of a process to change governance and to change the culture, and it cannot happen overnight. This is my view. I don't know what.
No, I used to always think about this.
Yeah.
Our generation had the questions, but we were afraid to ask. This generation is not afraid to ask. They have the same questions, maybe slightly more complex in a changed environment, but they're not afraid to ask. And they're not fearful of somebody who's older than them. We had a kind of respect derived from somebody being older. That has gone away.
Because now you see all the ratings, ESG rating done by CRISIL, you get all the advisories. If you're taking too many related party transactions or something which in the area of governance, it just comes to the board, If the audit committee chair is a strong person, then automatically to some extent it will start getting rectified, It will happen. It's a matter of time, but it cannot happen in a short period of time.
Yeah, from here.
Good morning, sir. I'm Vishal Javeri. So it was really, really inspiring and enriching hearing you out. So as you rightly stated that to start any business, governance is to be there from day one.
Yeah.
And so when you moved from Masjid Bandar to listing, as the organization grew into phases, so how did the governance principles were customized or they were scaled up or leveled up as the organization grew? So what kind of exercise went into that, or what kind of assessment went into that, sir?
See, the biggest shift happened when the business went from Bombay to Marico. And I got all the freedom to do things my way. Earlier there were some shortcuts taken because when there are multiple family members, it's very difficult to convince, and you can hold on to your own, but it's a battle which is difficult to overcome. So I think that was the first. And then when it become public, again, it's a big step up. Then there are other stakeholders like the board and others who play an important role in driving governance. But I think the belief has to come from the promoter or the managing director. And that luckily in the kind of business we built, it was very little of need to go to Delhi. People get shocked when I say that I have been to Delhi in my entire 50 years in a government office just once or twice. That also when we started exports of coconut oil to Bangladesh, we were exporting from here earlier, and the coconut oil prices went up and they banned the exports. And I had to go to the Commerce Secretary, Govind Pillai, and I said that this is something I built the brand and allow us to export in branded packs. He readily agreed. So that took me there, but luckily I have not gone to Delhi for anything else. In those days, I'm talking of the time I started, the route to success in corporate world was to get a license. Most of my contemporaries in business families, they were spending half the time in Delhi trying to bureaucrats and all that.
preempt licensing capacities. So
then
that
I became president of FICCI, then that took me to, but not on my own agenda, but for FICCI.
Yeah, right in the back. Yeah, go ahead. The two hands up between yourselves, you choose. Yes.
Sir, this is a question for you. Sir, in India we say that we've always seen a promoter never retires, okay? There's no retirement for the promoter at all. He is all pervasive. But as you move to professionally managed organizations, what is your view on succession planning? Specifically today, we see one of the best practices globally is when you appoint a CEO, at that date itself you have to plan for succession and not in the middle or the end of the tenure. But would love to hear you, because we've got a lot of people even in NRCs and boards who would love to hear your views on that.
So, I think our role now has shifted. In terms of promoters' families, it's one of my uncles and two of his sons, and me and my son are there. But we are very clear that our role as a family has shifted from a family managed organization to a strategic investor organization. So that's very clear. So we are now a strategic investor, and my son is not going to play an operational role. I don't have an operational role. I spend not more than 20% of my time on Marico. And I think that's made very clear to the management team. My current MD is there, maybe, I think he spent 5 years, there's 1 or 2 more years left. But if we replace, then we'll have some other professionals but we are accountable for that. I am equally accountable for the organizational results, irrespective of who manages that, because I am appointing, or me or my board is appointing that person. So a lot will depend on what is I think the family thinks about this, what kind of business you're building. And a larger issue which I am very clear is that the organization is built for perpetuity. So how do you build perpetuity in an organization, even if you're not there? So I'm very clear that the organization has to have a strategy which is captured in a 2-page document, which is just 2-page. What we will do, what we will not do, and why will we win. And that gets discussed at the board every year. Strategy can change because the environment is changing. So the board plays role in 3 areas. One is the strategy of the organization. Another is the culture of the organization, where we have a strong organizational culture based on values, and we actually test values amongst all our organizational members. We have something like 15-20 values at all locations. And wherever we find that some value has a low score in some location, or overall value score is low, then HR steps in. And that gets presented to the board. The third is the purpose of the organization, just beyond what it is doing in terms of a strategy. So that also gets tracked by the board. And finally, the board is accountable in terms of the team, appointing the managing director, as well as CXO, a lot of participation. So the board would play a very, very important role in ensuring perpetuity of Marico if something happened to me.
Last question. We have time here. Raja? Yeah. Raja, go ahead. Yeah.
I've known you for many years, Harsh. I've seen you grow also beautifully. But those years when I've seen you, what I noticed is that you identified good people and connected with them, and with a lot of respect took their advice and moved on from one level to another level. I think it's your interpersonal relationships with people, which founded your company in the initial stages. This is my view, as I noticed. But you tell us how you actually, at that stage, you did the foundation to your own company. You explain.
So it's a good question. As I said earlier, I am just a commerce graduate, and nobody has guided me, mentored me, coached me. So I have learned everything on my own by talking to individuals. Initial days, I started going to the market, appointing distributors, learning from distributors. I stayed at distributors' houses. Then we appointed ad agency to create a brand. I spent 1 week in the ad agency. Please teach me advertising. So all my life, whenever we have had to do something, I have learned from my own colleagues, from external help, thought leaders. So I think that's what, it's not just the personality, I think the desire to learn. Whenever you have an issue, I think you have to be clear in your mind what you want to learn. Because many times I find some promoter, I want a consultant, but please be clear what consultant. They say marketing consultant. I said marketing again is very, very vague. What marketing? So you have to be very, very clear if you want to appoint a consultant or if you want to talk to somebody, where do you want advice? You know? And then normally I do is I look at options and then prototype that in a small way and then scale it up. So I think the key thing for me is it's work for me and it will continue working for me because I think at the end of it, I need to learn. The environment is changing and no person in the world knows everything. So there are always blind spots. So whether it is your own colleagues or the board or some thought leader, I'd gone to sir also some years back. The first time I met you, I remember I came to your house.
Yes.
The board had at that time given me a mandate that we want, and I'm talking about 7-8 years back.
7-8 years ago. Yes.
That Marico board should be the best board in India. And it is your role to talk to thought leaders in the area of board management and come back with what we should do it differently. So then I had met him, I had met Dr. Reddy's, I think Mahindra, I met Tino Puri also, and just gathered what are the best practices in board, and then went back to the board and implemented many, and then we were selected one of the best boards in I think many years back. So
41 seconds, so it'd be very difficult to take a question. Deepthi, you want a question? Very, very short. Yeah.
I have a very short question.
Yeah.
Sir,
yeah.
my question is in the context of entrepreneurship and ESG.
Yeah.
So the new young entrepreneurs who do not get into the services or IT, etc., but are in real product manufacturing, which are consumables, how do they meet the competitive pressures while keeping ESG in mind? For example, in packaging materials, because their scale doesn't allow them to really, get savings out of usage of new products.
I don't know about the young people, but I think ESG, you have to be convinced that this is something you have to do. And there may be some short-term cost, but by and large I've seen that when you are pursuing some strategy of, for example, plastics. Now, you can say I will reduce plastics. You can look at the bottle if you're filling a bottle. We have lowered the plastic bottle weight substantially. I think we are the lowest in terms of per gram bottle. So there would be, by and large, I think there are savings. Sometimes if the savings are not there, it will happen. If you don't do all that, then it will impact you negatively as you grow, So the negative impact of something going wrong in the area of governance is much, much larger than spending that time or effort in doing it, even if you're small. I'm giving you a short answer because of time.
Great. I think we have a message here which says time is up. Time is always up. That's a problem with time. Okay. Thank you for being with us and sharing these thoughts. I think what I personally learned was, if I may use cricketing analogy, that in this age of T20 cricket also, it is more productive in the long run to play with a straight bat and not hit across the line. And that is what I think that's what he's demonstrated. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mariwala, for being so candid and frank with all your responses and also sharing your practical experiences with us. If I could request Mr. Damodaran to please present you with a small caricature of you done as you were seated in the hall. We'd also like to share with you that you have in the bag a certificate stating that 10 trees have been planted in your name in the Sundarbans. Thank you very much, sir. If we could take a picture with both of you on stage. A picture, sir.